Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How are you doing, Ken?
I'm excited to be here, Rory. You have joined us at episode 182 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We've got three topics that we're going to be covering today. We're going to start with our student check-in, where we kind of peer into what students may learn while on the journey to becoming a counsellor. And we're going to be speaking today about supervision, and more specifically, what are the tasks of supervision? This is going to be good info, and I think a good refresher for us qualified practitioners as well, just to remind ourselves why we pop into supervisions and what the actual reason of that is. We then go into the digital counselling revolution, where we recognise technology now forms a part in how counselling is consumed by many clients and delivered by many counsellors. And we're going to be speaking today about making reasonable adjustments for clients when we're working online. That's an interesting one, and I'm looking forward to that chat. And then in Practice Matters, we're going to take another peek into practice, something new, where we kind of speak to people involved in the counselling world and ask them what it's like in their day-to-day activities in what they do. And today, we're going to be hearing from Meg Moss, who is the CEO of the National Counselling Society. And it's basically a peek into what's it like being a CEO of an ethical body. So lots to look forward to in episode 182. We're so glad that you joined us, and we're going to start off with that student check-in. Rory, what are the tasks of supervision?
It's a really good question, Ken. And before I answer that question, it's a question that has come up in our Facebook page. And if you're not a member of our Facebook page, go to Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor. We're a closed group, but of course we're going to let you in. And you can join thousands and thousands and thousands of like-minded people who are in the world of counselling and psychotherapy. There's maybe students, there's qualified colleagues, there's tutors, there's supervisors, all commentating on the wonderful world, which is the counselling and psychotherapeutic world. And, you know, as we record this, a lot of people are asking about supervision. There's quite a few people going into supervision for the first time, and it can be quite a mystery of, you know, if you're a student and you're going into supervision, what happens? What is the procedure? And as a supervisor myself, I know that for students it can be quite confusing. So I think it's useful to understand the tasks of supervision. And to answer Ken's question, it's been a long introduction to answer Ken's question. The tasks are really formative, normative, restorative, and ethics. And formative is really a taught aspect, sharing information, sharing knowledge. Supervisor will do that for you. Normative, asking a supervisee to justify their work, and there's a strong link to ethics there. And then restorative, the supervisor offers support if the counsellor is struggling with an ethical issue or an aspect of their practice. And here's the thing, it is fluid. So you could start off in supervision asking for information, and you may end up being supported by your supervisor, who identifies that you may be struggling with a client. So I think a good supervisor would move through those three aspects, Ken.
Yeah, and I think when we're speaking about supervision, specifically when we're kind of linking it to what a student may be experiencing, you might be asked to write about supervision in an assignment. I think it's always good to start at the basis of supervision, of kind of the history, how it came about. And if you look at clinical supervision, it's originally based on an apprenticeship model. If you think about it, within an apprenticeship, somebody would learn a new task or a new skill, and then you would have someone who is a lot more experienced that would kind of look over that and go, oh, you want to maybe try doing it this way or doing it that way. I like what you're doing over there. Somebody that is there to kind of guide you and show you the ropes, as it were. Now, of course, that's the origins of supervision, and that's a great model, but we also recognize that a supervisor, clinical supervisor in today's age, will be somebody who, yes, has gone and had that experience and maybe walked the road, but they would also they would also have done specialist training to be able to work in supervision, looking at the different areas, as Rory have just mentioned, the kind of the areas that are mapped to in supervision. That is something you might pick up and learn on a supervision training course. And the restorative part of supervision is the recognition that we are human beings, and we go into our practice and we experience what we experience. Chances are we can maybe sometimes absorb some of what the client is bringing, or we may feel that we're not competent enough and we start dealing with our own self-doubts. So we're going in as a person. So our supervisor is, yes, looking at our practice, yes, looking at how we work within our practice, yes, looking at the ethics and how we comply to the legislation within our practice, and that we're acting in best service of the client. But they're also looking out for us as the person, that restorative part of, are we okay? How are we dealing with it? Now, the interesting thing is supervision is not therapy. So it is not appropriate to sit and go into deep therapy with your supervisor of things that you may be experiencing. Although the supervisor will work with you on that restorative level, often a supervisor may suggest that you go into your own counselling, your own personal counselling, to work on certain aspects, but you've got someone looking out for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that does happen more than once in my experience, both as a supervisee and as a supervisor, where I've had to realise that something's happened in practice that's triggered something in me, and I need to go and get some supervision, some personal therapy, to allow me to process the stuff that's going on for me. And I also think that these three positions in therapy speak to it being a managed activity. I think we need to remember the whole purpose of everything we do, and that is putting the client or the clients at the centre of absolutely everything in our practice. And the supervisor is thinking of the client. So when the supervisee comes to me, we're bringing the client into the room metaphorically, talking about the clients in a respectful way, thinking about how the supervisees work with that, looking at maybe any changes or interventions, but the client is always present with us. And I think that is something to really, really, really think about when you're going into supervision, to realise that you're presenting the client and your work.
Yeah, it's also a bonus point if you're writing an assignment. I was just thinking there, if you're asked to define what supervision is and what it looks like, if you put into that assignment that the supervisor is acting in the best interest of the client through you as the counsellor, but the supervisor is looking out for your clients. That's their job. That's what they're there for. And it's interesting, Rory, you mentioned you kind of will come into supervision. You may bring a client presentation, and a good supervisor will be more interested in how you reacted and how you worked with whatever that presentation is, and less interested in what the presentation is, unless it kind of indicates that there may be a danger or a vulnerability, and then of course then it becomes an ethical issue. But a supervisor is not necessarily looking at the content of what is presented by the client, but more how you as the practitioner are dealing with that content. So you may say, I had a client, they came in and they presented and they said this and this and this. The supervisor would then say, how did you work with that?
Absolutely. And it's all about developing the supervisor, developing the supervisee. I think one of the interesting things, it's an interesting term you don't hear very often now, is that counselling is as you rightly say, Ken, an apprenticeship. And we used to say apprentice, journeyman, master craft. Now, I'm not sure you can use that language in modern times because it is gender driven, isn't it? But it's an acknowledgement that when we start off, we are apprentices and we go through a journey of building our craft, of honing our craft, and that's done through practice, because, as you say, practice does make perfect, and also our CPD, our commitment to our own personal development, and then eventually we move on to that master craft where people are competent at their work. But it doesn't end there. There's still an element of development to retain that area of kind of master craftsmanship, or we'll call it craftsmanship. So it is interesting, and it also points to something really important if you are writing an essay on on supervision, and that is it's a managed activity. Part of being accountable for your practice is being managed. It's supervisory management, but at the heart of every supervisor is ethics, and they are always aware of if there's anything that could be either legally or ethically difficult that you're facing, and be able to help you work your way through that.
Yeah, definitely. It's, I think, a deep topic, supervision, and it's something that we look at again and again and again throughout our practice. We may change supervisors for personal reasons. One of the questions that very often comes up is how to best use supervision, and I think it's a unique relationship. It's like a counselor-client relationship, a supervisor-supervisee relationship. They are idiosyncratic in that my relationship with my supervisor may be totally different to the relationship of another supervisee with the same supervisor, in the same way as we have idiosyncratic relationships with clients, that it may feel different with one client to another client. So some kind of basics on preparing for supervision is, have you got an idea of what you want to discuss and why you want to take that in? So supervision is not something you go into and then it begins. Supervision is something that happens pretty much during and just after any client that you might see. You might be in with a client and something might come up and you might think, oh, that's something I might want to take to supervision. Or after a client has left, you might reflect on that, be doing your process notes or your client notes and think, now there's something to take into supervision. It's good practice to kind of jot things down that you might want to take into supervision. Chances are there may be times where you may take in your clinical notes to jog your memory, not to go into detail of what the client's presentations are, although there may be times when that is needed.
Yes, it's not about, as Ken has rightly said, it's not about pathologizing the client. It's about helping the supervisee understand how they're working with them, their own processes, maybe about the intervention. And there's different models. Your supervisors are taught with different models of supervision to be able to do that. And I also think it's about being accountable for all your practice. When I did my supervision training, the person who taught me said, if you have a supervisor who comes and you say to them, how many clients have you got? Who you're working with at the moment, or where are you in terms of your practice? And the supervisor, he says, well, I want to bring these, but this particular client, they're all right. Usually it's a good idea just to kind of pick up and say, okay, this client that's okay, let's maybe spend a few minutes talking about them. Because sometimes, if we're struggling with the client, it can be that we may not want to talk about them. So supervisors are keenly aware of supervising all your practice. And I have made a handout to help you with the tasks of supervision. If you go to counsellingtutor.com, go to the podcast tab, go to podcast 182, that handout is waiting for you there. But supervision, it's such an essential part of our practice. It's where the profession breathes, Ken.
Well, there you have it. That was our student check-in. And as we move away from the tasks of supervision, we look to digital counselling revolution, where we recognise the use of technology in this modern age of counselling. And today, speaking about making reasonable adjustments for clients.
Digital counselling revolution.
Yes, the digital world has asked us to look at many, many challenges, from using technology, be that on the phone or using a video platform, to thinking about how we can really offer a high quality service, and in terms of social justice, making sure that our clients get an equal opportunity to access our services. And I was thinking the other day that a lot of the stuff that's conducted online relies a lot on vision. It is, could be that you send a contract, you ask a client to read it. Could be that you're working on a video platform, as Ken and myself are today, and they are seeing each other. But what happens if you've got clients who've got specific areas of difficulty in their life? Maybe people have sight impairment. How do you send a contract to a client who's got sight impairment? And one of the interesting things that came up again in the Facebook page is one counsellor is recording the contract in an audio format and sending the audio link to the client so they can hear it. And these are the kind of creative ways that counsellors are working with to make sure that they have an inclusive practice.
Yeah, I mean the topic reasonable adjustments for clients, and we recognize specifically with the use of technology that there is a filter between us and the client, and that filter is the technology, and that filter's not there when we're in a room. When we are in the same room as that person, we can look them in the eye, feel their presence. That filter is not there. But as soon as we go online, we have to recognize that it is there. Yes, we shout about how effective online or telephone counseling may be. We can look to what the research says, but we also have to recognize that there is a barrier, and for some this barrier may be more challenging than others. Rory and I have spoken about what our individual, as the counsellor, as the therapist, what our relationship with technology looks like, and how that can influence the counselling relationship. And we've also spoken in previous podcasts about how we look to what is the client's relationship with technology. What is their do they have any areas where they struggle working online? Do they understand what a browser is? Do they have an email account? Do they check email on a regular basis? So there's things that we need to consider, and it's different with each person. Again, it's idiosyncratic, as is so much with counselling. They are individuals that come with an individual life path that they have walked, and we need to be flexible in how we deal with this lens of technology that sits between us and that client. And the client doesn't necessarily need to have an impairment such as a visual impairment for us to go to the recording of a contract. It may just be that is more comfortable for them. How can a client sign a contract and send it back to you online? Is there perhaps allowance that we can make, that they can make a verbal agreement? And I don't know, and I'm not saying yes or no, and I'm not stating for your practice, but I am stating that we need to consider and have a think about how we can work differently. But of course, we still need to be ethical. We still need to be working within the law and legislation. So we do have boundaries we need to stay within, but we can make reasonable adjustments for clients.
Absolutely. And, this podcast may be listened to in different parts of the world. We know it is. And if you are in another part of the world, well, hello to you. So you need to think about the legislation and the laws in the country that you're residing in. One of the things that really struck me is that online counselling, certainly video platform counselling, has given an opportunity in terms of making reasonable adjustments that may have in the past been quite difficult, and that is if someone needs the use of a sign language. Obviously, if you've got a client and they need someone to sign language for them, or indeed interpret, so it could be someone who has a hearing impairment or somebody who they cannot speak English. The notion of getting an interpreter can be quite difficult because people have to travel around. Interpreters have to travel and they'd have to meet and you'd have to contract and that is something that does happen in counselling. But it struck me that if you're using a video platform, it could be a lot more straightforward. You meet up, you introduce the interpreter into the room, you all meet. It seems a more straightforward process. So I think in some ways working online in terms of offering reasonable adjustments may actually be easier than working face-to-face and in the room, because someone can sit at home, they can just log in, they can do the interpretation. You can work with the client, and then you can log out again. So it'd be interesting to see, as digital counselling or online counselling takes a hold, how that works. And I think that actually may be one of the areas that it's actually better than face-to-face work.
Yeah, and I guess It's definitely different, and it maybe offers different choices working via technology. One of the choices that came to mind when you were speaking about maybe having a sign interpreter is that in that instance, I wonder if video counselling or sight counselling would be the best option for someone who is if someone is visually impaired, it may be not the best option. Maybe telephone would be a better suit for them. Maybe somebody who is hearing impaired, maybe email counselling, where it is text-based, might be a better suit for them. So I guess it does perhaps give us different options and different ways of working. And then there's areas of counselling. I remember doing some miniature work at one stage, and miniature work was basically it was the counsellor that I was working with. I was the client in this instance, had a box, and within that box were a number of little tiny miniatures of real life things. A miniature Big Ben from London, and a miniature bus, and a miniature car, and it was just full of all these little models and miniatures. And the exercise was to take one of these miniatures and have a look at it, something that resonated with me, and then just to talk about this miniature. And it was really an interesting journey, how I found myself relating where I was emotionally to this inanimate object that I was holding in my hand. And of course, working online, you don't have the ability to have physical objects in the room. But there are now people doing research and playing around with digital items that can be shared and digital resources that can be shared online. And I think this is the exciting and interesting part of the digital counselling revolution, is that there is innovation happening right now. And I don't know what it's going to look like in 5 years. I'm excited for it. I am excited for it. But it starts with us understanding that we need to make a reasonable adjustment, that we need to be flexible, that we can't just take the way we've done it and the way that it's always worked within a room, within four walls, with another human being there, and put it online and expect it's going to stay the same. I think it's going to adjust anyway by the very nature of what we're doing, and I'm excited for it. And we can be part of that evolution as individual counsellors by making our reasonable adjustments with our clients.
Yes, absolutely. So Ken's made a really good point that actually these reasonable adjustments that we might make for specific clients may actually cascade into our practice in general. We may end up using them for every client. And I think you're absolutely right, Ken. I think that technology is going at a pace at the moment. It's always been ongoing development, and I think that once therapists get into using online and telephone counselling, the technology will drive the way they work. So I think we've not seen, we've not seen what online and telephone counselling therapy can do. They've already got things like online sandboxes for child therapy. And of course, people are talking about virtual reality. So this is going to move counselling and psychotherapy very, very quickly as people engage with the new technologies and clients engage with them. I think we've literally got a revolution in our hands.
Oh, without a doubt. And as we kind of leave this topic, it for me goes back again to what is our mindset. Are we open to these new changes? Are we open to the new technologies coming in? When you speak about virtual reality, virtual reality is a reality. It is out there and it is being used, and it is being used therapeutically. But I wonder what feelings come up for you when you think about that as the listener to this, of virtual reality. Is that therapy as you know it, as you learned it, as you read about it in the textbooks? Maybe we do need to go back and look at that. What is our relationship in order to be open to these adjustments that are happening in front of us? And I know from my own personal experience, and I only speak for myself here, there are times when I can find change very challenging. It's not the way I did it. I'm resistant to change when it first comes along. And I think that that's about me, and that's about me having to look at who I am and again examine what my relationship is with technology. It's interesting. That's the first topic that we cover in our online and telephone certificate training course, is that relationship with technology. And so much links back into that when you kind of go full circle on it, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. It is a big jump from going from face to face into the online world if you've not done it before, and we really have to acknowledge our mindset. And the key mindset frame here is it's different but not second best. If we go into the practice room virtually thinking we're offering a second best service, that is going to impact on the client. And lots of people who graduated our course have said that their mindsets changed completely. They've started off thinking, well, this is just a stopgap, it's just something, to help me either keep employed or keep in contact with clients. But actually, the evidence would suggest that a lot of practitioners are seeing it to be a useful part of their practice. And I was looking at some research the other day, and there's a number of percentages that are being bandied about of how therapists will return to their practice after COVID. And the kind of figure that I'm looking at was between 59 and 69% will still offer a mixed blended delivery. So digital counselling and the online counselling revolution is going to be with us forever. It's going to be a part of the counselling offer, no matter where you go.
If you're interested in our course, it is online and telephone counselling, a certificate in online and telephone counselling. Go to counsellingtutor.com. We also have a book that has been published, which is a great textbook if you're a student, or a great reference book if you're a qualified practitioner. It is called Online and Telephone Counselling, a Practitioner's Guide. You can find that by just going onto the internet and putting it in as a search term, Online and Telephone Counselling book. It will come up. It is available in most countries through Amazon. So there you go. That is Digital Counselling Revolution. We now go into what we call Practice Matters. In Practice Matters, we look at the day-to-day practice of being a counsellor. We've got a new section called Peek into Practice, where we speak to individuals about what they do in a real day-to-day situation within their practice. And we look at different elements of counselling. And Rory, you met up with Meg Moss, who is the CEO of the National Counselling Society, the NCS, based here in the UK. And today we're going to be taking a peek into the practice of a CEO of an ethical body.
Practice Matters.
It's my great pleasure to welcome Meg Moss from the National Counselling Society, Chief Executive Officer of the National Counselling Society. Thank you so much, Meg, for agreeing to this interview.
No, thank you for inviting me. So it's always nice to have a chat with you, Rory. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much. And I'm wondering what kind of piqued your interest in being a CEO? What was your journey to getting to where you are?
So I've been with the Society for actually nearly 6 years. So in about a week and a half, I've been there for 6 years. And I started as an administrator because I'd done some counselling training and I saw this job opportunity come up, and I thought that is going to be really helpful in my journey to becoming a counsellor. That will help me get some of the background information about what you need to do. So I started off as doing admin. Quite a few people will probably remember me from those days. I spoke to a lot of our members. And then an opportunity came up to manage the administration team, and I thought, I'm really enjoying serving members of the society. I think there's loads of things that we can do better in the admin team. So I took on the role and made a lot of changes there. And then I got the opportunity to do some maternity cover as a deputy CEO. Our deputy, Freya, went on maternity leave and had a little boy, Theo. And then so I covered her for a few months, and I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed kind of working. A lot of that deputy CEO role is about working with partners across the profession. So being involved in projects, taking on kind of social media and having conversations on social media about different things, really kind of working with people in a positive way to improve counselling, psychotherapy, access to mental health, So I was talking a lot to politicians. I was talking a lot to people like IAP, the IAP program. It was when I was deputy CEO that we actually got recognition in the IAP program. So I was doing that, and then again, an opportunity came up to cover the CEO role. But our previous CEO left, so I was acting CEO and deputy CEO for a time, and that was a challenge. But then obviously Freya came back and is deputy CEO again now, and I was offered the post as CEO, and it's kind of just been, a series of opportunities to keep doing things better. And I think because that's always been my goal, so starting from admin, the reason I moved up in a role was because I had loads of ideas of ways to do what we do but better. And that, that meant that when they were looking for someone to cover the deputy CEO role, that I was the choice to do that, because again, I had loads of ideas about how I could take what we already do and improve on that, and how we could expand, and people that we could talk to, ways that we could take on campaigns. So things like campaigns for making sure that qualified counsellors are paid fairly for the work that they do. So those kind of things that were covered while I was deputy CEO, and we picked that stuff up. And again, I was really excited to take on the CEO role, because I think, this gives me the opportunity to do even more of what I really love, which is taking the counselling profession and growing it and developing it and supporting it. And I have been given the honour of being able to do that, and I'm quite determined not to let everybody down. So yeah, I'm putting everything that I can into it, and that's kind of why I'm here. That was very long, sorry.
Well, I think it was a very concise answer, and I heard you've done so much in the time you've been in the role. What kind of changes have you overseen since you took the role of CEO? What kind of milestones do you think the NCS has gone past?
Well, I mean, so it was March 2020 that I was officially offered the CEO role, and then obviously we had the COVID pandemic, which I came straight into. And I think one of the things that was really important for us to achieve through that time is just to make sure that our members were really supported in terms of guidance around how to work with clients throughout the COVID pandemic. And obviously we managed to do that. So working with partners across the profession. So for example, with Counselling Tutor, we quality checked courses. We have spoken with government, with the Professional Standards Authority, to put together guidance on how therapists, or how and when therapists can work face-to-face with clients, and if not, what's best practice for working remotely, all of that kind of stuff. So we've had quite a lot of good feedback from members, so I think that kind of went okay. That was the major challenge, or has been the major challenge since I've been in post as CEO. The other thing was the Scope project. So obviously that's still ongoing, working with our partners across the profession for that, making sure that we represent the voices of our members, and also members in the profession who feel like they haven't been heard with regards to some of their concerns and queries about the project. So we've really taken that mantle on as well. Other things that I've done kind of from a more on a slightly smaller level is I've made our what was our administration team is now our membership services team. So we've put a lot more focus on providing service to our members, and I think that really reflects something that we've always put a lot of time into. We always answer the phone. We always answer questions, no matter how complicated those questions are, and want to provide as much support for members as we can. because ultimately that's why we're here. We're a membership organisation. That's what we're here to do. And I've put a lot of time and thought into streamlining some of those processes so that we can do that better. We now have an absolutely excellent head of membership services in post who's doing a fantastic job. She's only just started at the beginning of the year, named Camilla. But she's really getting to grips with the team, and I think that she'll be a great asset to our members because she's just, she's bringing a lot to enable the team to really support them. I think those have been the real major milestones.
Absolutely. And what I'm hearing as you speak about it is that all your work is in service of your members, supporting them and making them feel heard and representing them. You've talked about your work with, government and stakeholders. And it sounds very much like that you put your members first and you want your members to be represented. And I especially picked up the part where you talk about counsellors being rewarded for their work, paid for their work, championing that. I wonder what the average day of your CEO work looks like, if there is an average day.
No particular average day, but kind of on a weekly basis. I'm in a lot of meetings. I feel like I live on Zoom. So whether that's one-to-ones with my team, which I do every week. So Fridays are my team day. So I have catch-ups with everybody, reflect on how the week's gone, plan for the week ahead. Then I will, throughout the week, I'll have meetings with, people like the NHS, with the National Psychological Professions Workforce, with other accredited register holders. So I make sure to keep in contact with people throughout the profession, potentially people who want to talk to me about projects or campaigns they're running. So maybe yourselves, maybe people like CT UK, maybe people from Partners for Counselling and Psychotherapy, other campaign groups. My emails and my phone are always open. I don't have a kind of protective policy on that. If anyone wants to get in touch with me, then they can. Because we do a lot of research, I spend, by research, I mean in terms of our membership, I spend quite a lot of time putting together surveys for members to find out what they're thinking, writing up things like our take on policies, and things that have come out. So our interpretation of things that are happening in the profession, working with people like Elaine, who's our comms manager, to put together things like really valuable social media campaigns that might drive people to look at our register or and to look for our members, or even just things like just promoting finding a counsellor on an accredited register, those kind of things.
It sounds to me like you've got a very, very busy diary, and it's a mix between external stakeholders and looking at the internal. You're looking outwards and you're looking inwards. What are your hopes for the NCS? What do you hope that your tenure as CEO will finally bring?
I hope that we just become the kind of professional home that people just really want to be in. I know we won't fit everybody. We don't. We have our own particular ethos. But for those who want to join the NCS and who want to be a part of the NCS, I want them to feel like we are supporting them in the best way that we can. I don't have any designs on being the biggest professional body or even a necessarily large professional body. I just want I want the NCS to be somewhere that if you're a member, you see that your membership renewal comes up every year and you go, oh, cool, that's good. I'm enjoying this membership. I really get a lot out of it. And that's kind of what helps me to sleep at night.
Well, I think that note, you probably sleep very well. and Meg Moss, thank you so much.
Thanks, Rory.
A very big thank you to Meg Moss from the National Counselling Society, and a thank you to you, Rory, for kind of meeting up with Meg to have that peek into practice.
Yes, and I think what was really interesting for me here in the interview was just how much hard work goes into representing counsellors that Meg does at every level. We heard the kind of things that she was involved in, being that, the political side of things, or talking to professional standards organisations, and I think it's unseen work. We see the documentation coming from ethical bodies, about how we're working, how ethics are changing, but we don't see the hard work that goes behind it and what drives it. So we really do thank Meg for her time out of a busy day to be interviewed.
Yeah, and if you're interested in the National Counselling Society, getting more information, just head on over to counsellingtutor.com, podcast tab, episode 182. We have all the links from today's episode right there on that page. And when you're there, don't forget Rory's super duper handout from our student check-in, those tasks of supervision. Grab that download as well. So a page very well worth visiting.
Well, I think it's been a jam-packed podcast today. We started off with the tasks of supervision, hopefully informing students who are going into their first supervisionary session and helping them understand how supervisors work. Then we talked about making reasonable adjustments for clients, making sure that every client can get access to counselling and psychotherapy and some creative ways of doing that. And then finally, in Peak into Practice, we caught up with Meg Moss from the National Counselling Society, who shared a little insight into her work and her day as a Chief Executive Officer. And as always, stay grounded, stay safe, and hey, join the digital counselling revolution.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.